an exciting and a special opportunity to celebrate women and leadership, and I'd like to give her a round of applause. So, by background, I'm an occupational therapist. I'm a graduate of the Medical College of Virginia with a degree in occupational therapy. And in 2001, I established a private practice specifically for children with disabilities, focusing on physical, speech, and occupational therapy. And quite often I get a question about, how did you become a practice owner? How did you venture from being a clinician into becoming an entrepreneur? So instead of just standing up here today and just telling you all about my story, I really wanted to tie it into principles that I feel like that you can take and apply. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you're applying it to become an entrepreneur for your primary practice. Quite often people have side hustles. How many people in here have like a side hustle? Like you're selling direct sales, you may be teaching part-time. For those of you that aren't familiar with that terminology, I said it's 2018 about those that are venturing outside of their primary occupations to pursue other avenues. So these same principles can be applied to that as well. So in talking about my story, the first thing that I identified was, really what were my strengths? What talents did I have? What skill sets did I have? And were these above average? Was there something that were marketable? Was it something that I could offer that there was a service or a resource that was not being offered in the community? And for me, as an occupational therapist, I graduated, this is going to date me just a little bit, but I graduated in December of 1996, and I had a stipend with the Danville Regional Memorial Hospital, and I returned to work for them for a period of 2 years. And in that time, I really had this expectation that I was going to arrive, and I was going to be mentored, and I was going to learn, and they were going to gradually, introduce me to the patients. And I arrived, and on the first day, the therapist looked at me, and she handed me a clipboard and a lab coat and said, "Thank God you're here." And I said, "Oh no." She said, "Come with me to the floor." And so what I had to do, because the census was so high and training was really not available, just because we were just trying to meet the caseload and the demands of our patients, I really started sending myself all over the country to every continuing ed course I could find, specialty certifications in adult neuro and orthopedic hand therapy and pediatrics. And I really started to develop my specific skill set. And so in doing so, moving on to the next slide, I was able to identify an opportunity. I really wanted to provide pediatric therapy services. And at that particular time, really the only pediatric therapy services that were available were through the hospital. And really at the hospital, they were kind of low down on the totem pole. Just in the fact that if census was high in the hospital, or if there was more of a demand in skilled nursing or outpatient, they would often pull from the pediatric staff to cover the demand. So we had therapists that were traveling to the schools to provide services in the schools, because with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that requires that if a child is unable to perform in their educational setting to the best of their ability without a service like physical or speech occupational therapy, the educational setting is required to provide that. So that in our area at that particular time, the schools were contracting with the hospital for those services. So I knew that in our area, we are surrounded by UNC Chapel Hill, we have Duke, we have Wake Forest, we have Children's Hospital Richmond, we have UVA. We have these large health organizations that our families in our area were having to travel to for their specialty services. So if they needed to see, their child needed to see an orthopedist or a neurologist, their developmental pediatricians were often located in these larger areas. But the disconnect was they were referred for their follow-up physical, speech, or occupational therapy, and there really were no services in our community. So unless you were a family that could travel out of town and pursue those services somewhere like Duke or one of the other institutions, you really were not able to get the services for your children. So I knew that this was a service, a resource that was not available in our area. So when I was looking at, well, is this opportunity going to be right? Some things I had to consider would have been timing, the value, the sustainability, and the marketability. So when considering timing, value, opportunity, sustainability of that opportunity, I had to identify the experts who were already providing services similar to what I would like to have provided, similar to what I wanted to provide in our area, who were providing services maybe in some of the surrounding areas. So I identified some of these individuals. Some of them lived in neighboring cities. Some of my former classmates from school were providing these outpatient services in their states. And so I just started picking their brains. I felt like you're already doing it, you've already got the information. I started picking their brains. So seeking out the advice of the experts around you is really key to being prepared for stepping out and venturing into your opportunity. And like I say, there's no need to reinvent the wheel, right? It works pretty well. Occasionally we may need to enhance it, but reinventing the wheel of someone that's already put their time and expertise into it, that's a waste of your time. So really picking the brains of those that have been successful, they're already doing it, that really works to your advantage. So in looking at, okay, now I know that I have a strength, I have a skill set. I am training other staff members because I've sent myself all over the country to further my education. And I know that I have this skill set that apparently is needed in our community. There's an opportunity because no one else is really doing it. So then I had to think about what are the resources? What is it that I would need in order to be able to provide this service? And there was a Fortune 500 CEO that was speaking, and I can't remember his name, but basically he was giving a speech about success. And he says that too often, specifically like when we are in class or we're in school or we're in business management courses, we're told to focus on our weaknesses, really focus on the areas that you're weak in and build up those skills. He says the opposite. He says focus on your strengths, stay in your lane, and then identify those that have the strengths in the areas that you are weak, and pull your resources in. So for me, my resource ended up being Tommy Mathena. He owns Danville Orthopedic Athletic Rehab. And I knew that he already had a well-established organization, an organization that, would be able to bill, already had the third-party certifications in place, Medicaid, Medicare numbers, and billing was not my strength. Clinical services were my strength. His strengths were administration. So identifying a resource and linking into someone that had strengths in areas that I was not as strong. So the next step would be, do you decide to engage in the risk? And I really like this slide. It says you'll always miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And that's from Wayne Gretzky. So, now granted, at this particular time, I was still pretty young. And it's just like when you compare the 5-year-old that's standing on the mountain to go down the ski slope compared to the 30-year-old that's standing on the mountain getting ready to go down the ski slope. The 5-year-old's just really excited. It looks like a great opportunity. He can't wait to go fast, feel with that, feel the wind in his hair and see how fast he can go. And the 30-year-old is thinking, you know what, I could really break a leg. particular time, I have to recognize that I was young. I didn't have a family at that particular time. I didn't have some of the risk that, leaving my position as a staff clinician at a hospital, specifically in a community like Danville or South Boston. This time I was working in South Boston, where, we traditionally, individuals did not leave large health organizations or large industries. We had Dan River, we had our tobacco industry, we had the hospital. People basically, when they began their employment, they retired there. So my mother, being an RN for 30 plus years at that particular time at the hospital, it was just really difficult for her to understand that I was going to leave a really good, stable paying job to go and engage in this risk. But I think for me, having youth on my side, somewhat some naivete. I was kind of like the 5-year-old. I wasn't thinking about breaking my leg and everything that, bad could happen. I was thinking of all the good things that could happen. So I would say that definitely had, its influence on me. But certainly we have to weigh those risks, and we have to decide, whether or not we want to engage, because, the courage to engage in the risk, it separates those that want to do versus those that do. So, let's talk about women in business. I think this is a very exciting time for women in leadership and those that are looking to venture into business. I wanted to pull some statistics, and these were from 2017. And according to the National Association of Women Business Owners, women-owned firms, 51% or more, account for 39% of all privately held firms and contribute 8% of employment and 4.2% of revenues. And moving to the next slide, why would women have advantages in business? Well, if you become a certified women's business enterprise, it provides for opportunities. What people often do not know is that the federal government actually sets aside 5% of their federal contracting dollars to go towards women-owned businesses. Now, granted, quite often those dollars don't get spent because we do not have enough women applying for these contracts. But if you are an agency that is bidding for a contract with the federal government in one of these areas that they've set aside this funding for, and then you're going up against a business that is predominantly male, you actually have an advantage over that other business. Corporations that do business with women-owned businesses often receive tax incentives because they are demonstrating that they've implemented a program of diversity. So now more than ever, there are opportunities that the federal government is setting aside, and then including these tax incentives. Corporations are looking for women-owned businesses. I have found my husband has a packaging business, and he has said that specifically in his industry, they can't spend enough of their dollars set aside for women-owned businesses. There's not enough in the marketplace for suppliers or a company to pull from. So it's really interesting information. Women are great leaders, and what's really exciting is that we have the data to prove it. So there was a study in 2012 by Zenger-Folkman and for the Harvard Business Review, and then it was recently updated, and he shared it on the Facebook page, or the website page for CNBC Make It in December of 2017. And so he was a psychometrician. He is a psychologist, basically, that deals with, has a specialty in computer science and statistics. And he designed a tool to measure leadership effectiveness. The firm notes that although more women have been entering the U.S. workforce and contributing growth to the nation's GDP, women still remain an untapped resource. And why is that? Well, if you look at the data on the next slide, in the areas of initiative, drives for results, practices self-development, displays high integrity and honesty, develops others, inspires and motivates others to high performance, builds relationships, champions change, establishes stretch goals, collaboration and teamwork, connects the group to the outside world, solves problems and analyzes issues, communicates powerfully and prolifically, and then at the bottom, innovates for technical or professional expertise and develops strategic perspective. 13 out of 16 of these women ranked higher than men. I think that's pretty exciting. Only time for innovation. And when looking at women and why women make great leaders, we have a lot of qualities as females that really can be utilized in the workforce. We are nurturing. We understand work-life balance. If you are in management, especially for me, most pediatric therapists are female. I have to understand work-life balance because most of my female staff are mothers. And for that, I allow for flexibility in the workforce, which is going to help with retention and overall job satisfaction. Women understand emotions and how they relate to one another. So if I'm picking up on emotions, maybe with a particular staff member, I may somewhat modify my approach to that person based on, their emotional state, where specifically in the data, men don't really pick up on that as well. I'm sure we're not surprised by that, right? They're kind of just trudging forward, and if they do pick up on an emotion, quite often they just don't understand it. Women are multitaskers, right? So many of us are moms, or we have other roles. I teach fitness classes. I'm the president of the board of the directors of the Museum. I'm on the Danville Concert Association's board. I have these lots of hats that I'm wearing, and I quite often have to multitask. Moms have to do that. I'm not a mom, but my sisters are, and I have to witness, all that they have to manage, and that translates into the workforce. Women are fueled by challenge. When I went up against the hospital to bid for the therapy services that they had for, I don't even know how many years at that point. And I actually won. I got the bid, and the services moved away from Danville Regional to myself. My previous boss called their special education director and said, "She's an excellent therapist. She'll never be able to do this on her own." She shared it with me. And you know what? I said, "Thank you." Because that's all I needed to hear. Once I heard I couldn't do it, I knew I would do it. I knew I would be successful. So that translates to the workforce. We like challenges, and we usually step up to the game. Women handle crisis situations actually better than men. Who do your children run to when they're hurt? It's mommy. They never run to daddy, they run to mommy. We handle crisis situations, and the data shows that. What I want to, I think, stress as I'm closing is that, moving on, is that we need to embrace our female qualities. We have qualities that are useful and superior at times, according to the data, to our male counterparts. And I heard a quote from Dr. Doris Day. If anybody knows who she is, she's like a celebrity dermatologist. She's in New York. She is on the Doctor's Channel on Sirius. She's written books. She's the expert in the field. And she was being interviewed, and I really liked what she said. She said that her father, who was a surgeon, when she was graduating and she was getting ready to go into residency, he said, "Do not compromise what is great about you being a female." He said too often when he's been in surgery or he's witnessed some of his residents and even some of the nurses that are working in a predominantly male environment, they start to change their behavior. They start to act more masculine. He said, you don't have to be like a man to fit into the business world. And that, to me, I thought was pretty profound. I think that we need to embrace what we have, that it makes us unique, makes us strong, and makes us the female leaders that we are. So, throughout history, women have been stepping up to the challenges. Women have had to fill these shoes, specifically with World War II, when all of our men were overseas. Who kept the country running? It was the women. So thank you so much for today. I'm excited that we're celebrating women empowerment, and I wish you success in all that you do.